Hey people, what's going on? It's Jameel. And now I've become an expert on the target's approach to what is known as quote unquote gang stalking. And gang stalking, I feel, is a very elusive term that doesn't really fit for a lot of people. A gang is just three or more people. So, like, if you go out to the park and three or more people just start following you around town from the park, then technically you're being gang stalked. It can be three old ladies. It doesn't, people hear gang and they think of the vice lords in Chicago or some the Crips or whatever like that. It doesn't have anything to do with a street gang that sells drugs and graffitis on walls. But in some cases, it actually is real gang members that are paid to do it, like the Kanisha Jenkins case per se. But anyhow, um, people have to relate what's called gang stalking into a historical connotation that makes sense. So the Cheka from the Soviet Union would be a great example. The Cheka from the Soviet Union used gang stalking. It was psychological sensory deprivation uh, techniques they would use on people. If you take somebody and you put them in the penitentiary and you put them in a cell and cut the lights off for 30 days, their sensory deprivation is going to make them lose their minds. They're going to be banging their head against the door. Through sensory deprivation, they get an individual isolated enough so that individual acts out irrationally. And over a period of time of continuously covertly doing this to an individual over and over and over again, it can kill the individual, make them kill themselves. It can make the individual get a gun and just go out on a murder spree. I mean, it can do a lot of different things. Um, it can also make the individual more spiritual or make the individual more smarter. But it is a heinous um, activity that's being done to the individual. Now, going back to the Cheka from the Soviet Union, you got to look at what happened in East Berlin and Eastern Europe from the Stasi. Now, the Stasi were a puppet government of the KGB, and the KGB were very powerful. KGB are very powerful organization that uses terrorist opportunity methods. They even have a secret department in the KGB known as Wet Affairs that specializes in terrorism. And in Eastern Berlin, in Eastern Europe, the Stasi came up with a formula called Zersetzung, where they said, we're in the 1970s. We cannot just go out and eviscerate whole villages and kill 400 people at a time like we could in the 40s and 50s. We're going to need something that's effective but very difficult for the individual to fight, or very difficult for the individual to prove. And no one else from the outside can detect it easily. So they came up with Zersetzung. And Zersetzung is gang stalking. Um, Zersetzung is gang stalking. So Zersetzung German is German for decomposition. It's a psychological warfare technique used by the Ministry of State Security, or Stasi, to repress political opponents in East Germany during the 70s and 80s. And stuff is deep. I mean, there's a lot of victims of Zersetzung in Eastern Europe who want their files. And their family members were being used against them. Their neighbors were being used against them. Everybody around them was being paid off basically by the official government to secretly destroy the lives of their own citizens. And it's a horrific crime. And, a lot of people aren't aware of the Stasi and the Zersetzung, and people always talk about the Nazis were so horrible. And yeah, the Nazis did a lot of questionable, horrible activity, but wait till you see what the communists did. Wait till you see what the communists are capable of. And the communists can operate right here in North America, and you won't even. There's KGB agents out rolling around the country. You don't even know they're there. And you know, people think the Cold War is over. You got another thing coming. So I'm gonna put a link up for Zersetzung. And then COINTELPRO can be closely related to Zersetzung, but not really. COINTELPRO had a little bit different tactic. COINTELPRO is similar to that song, but the strategies they use in COINTELPRO were more for political dissidents and political opponents, sort of like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. They weren't, the COINTELPRO wasn't there for a whole population of people. It was more specific individuals and specific organizations. But that song was set up just for a gigantic population of people. And Scientology stalking, or fair games stalking, is closely related. And if David Miscavige is watching this, I mean no offense to the Church of Scientology. I'm not involved in the Church of Scientology. I don't mean any offense. But I've had numerous people contact me claiming they had left the Church of Scientology and they were being what you call gang stalked and followed around. And if you watch the footage, it's very similar to gang stalking, the Scientology fair game. The only difference is if I'm in Scientology and it's a Scientologist doing it, I know what's going on and I know it's them versus, hey, these are people I don't know and I don't know what's going on. So now I'm done with that. Microwave weapons. A lot of people say this stuff sounds like Star Trek. You mean people are out following you around and they're using electronical guns? Yeah. The electronical gun thing, you can go back to an article called Microwave Weapons Are Prime Suspects in Ills of U.S. Embassy Workers. Doctors and scientists say microwave strikes have caused sonic delusions and very real brain damage among embassy staff and family members. And this is an article in the New York Times. And in the United States of America, there's people saying, hey, I'm being hit by, my neighbors are using electronical weapons on me, radiation weapons. And even a teenager, I'll post some links, even there's teenagers on YouTube making microwave weapons. It reminds me of back in the days in New York City, people used to be able to make a zip gun. A zip gun was a one-shot gun, and teenagers could make a zip gun and go up to somebody and blow their head off with one shot. It only shot one gun, but it was still a gun. You know, you get hit, you get hit. Microwave weapons are the same way. And you can be in your house sleeping, and a neighbor could be projecting a microwave weapon on your skull when you're asleep. Now, this is major criminal felony activity. You can spend a lot of years in prison for doing something like this, but it's happening. Microwave weapons. And so these people were at the U.S. Embassy, and you got Marines outside the U.S. Embassy, and these people are talking about they're having delusions. They can't think straight. They're under attack. So this sounds very similar to me as the people on YouTube in America are saying they're being hit by their neighbors. They're having to, they can't think straight. Sounds like the same thing, And this is nothing new. If you go back to like the old Soviet Cold War era, United States employees have been talking about this for decades. It's nothing new. But so then you have. But the Zrzet song needs to be investigated by researchers. If you really want to if you have never heard of anything called gang stalking, you need to go look at Scientology fair game, and then you need to look at Zrzet song, and then look at the microwave weapon phenomena and all this stuff. And I really don't go into the electronic. I never really went into the electronic stuff very much. But, it's being used. And it's really nothing secret. If there's a lot of people out there, there's police officers who are talking about it's happened to them. There's federal agents who have said it's happened to them, like Ted Gunderson, the former head of the Los Angeles FBI, was being gang stalked. Like, if you can be the head of a whole regional department of the FBI and get gang stalked, I mean, anybody can get it, like a president can get it. So I just wanted to keep people up to date on the variables. So like the education level in America is very low when it comes to stuff like this, and it should be much higher. Because in the United States of America, you know how many people died in Normandy fighting against the Nazis? How many people lost their lives in the Cold War fighting against the Viet Cong or fighting against the North Koreans or whatever? The Cold War had a lot of wars within itself. And in America, we have libraries and we have the internet, and people still don't know what this, like, what do you mean you don't know what gang stalking is? Like, don't you see that there's countries out there like Pol Pot in Cambodia and all over the world where they've used these methods of isolation and stalking and group networks to like terrorize people? and usually it leads to more horrible things. Like the education level is really, I just don't. There's like tons of educational material on and then down here on Zerzetsung, it shows COINTELPRO 19 on paper from 56 to 57. I mean 56 to 71. And that's the federal government. That's like this is the crazy part. You have the federal government with their own documentation saying it's real. What's there to argue about? So there's nothing, I don't see what's there to argue about. And that's a look at Zerzetsung, Scientology, stalking, and microwave weapons. So again, if you say I don't get what's happening, it doesn't make sense. Like all you have to do is click on these links and read them. If you can click on the links and read them, you can educate yourself. You can have that power.